as vaccination rates move closer to reopening targets, Australia could be issued with an international vaccine passport. But it's not the only form of proof you're likely to need. A second system will be necessary to return to pubs and clubs as well. Live now to Trudy McIntosh. There are plenty of logistics to work out here, Trudy.
Yeah, we certainly have a lot of details to be completed, Laura, before we do see these two very separate passports. One's the actual passport you probably need to dust off and get out of the cupboard. This is allowing international travel to resume. The federal government is working on linking that to the vaccination status so that people can go to and from Australia and have proof that they have been vaccinated. They're working on the details of this. Potentially it could be integrated into the chip in the passport itself, or using a QR code system, or potentially even a paper certificate to show you have had 2 jabs. The federal government looking at starting to issue these from October. There's the completely separate matter, though, what we talk about as a vaccine passport, something Scott Morrison doesn't like to refer to it as because there's some within the coalition who don't believe this should be necessary at all. What this does, though, is unlock domestic freedoms for people who are fully vaccinated. Show that you've been vaccinated and get into the pub or the footy. The PM telling states to get a wriggle on with this in terms of integrating this QR code system we've been using to check in, making sure that that can also say at the very same time if you've had a vaccine. The ACT Chief Minister, though, says the app in the Territory currently wouldn't really work for that matter, so there's going to have to be a lot of technical work done behind the scenes to ensure this can happen. Here was Scott Morrison, though, on why it's necessary.
The QR code readers that the states have, they need to work to be able to show whether someone has been vaccinated or not. Now, we're working with the states and territories to enable that. In New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia, they have very good systems that can accommodate that.
Is that just for travel, or are you thinking for sporting events, restaurants?
All of the above.
Trudy, states are being promised that they will get their fair share of Pfizer.
There's certainly been a pretty big brawl in the last 24 hours, though, Laura, over this special allocation, as some people have called it, going to New South Wales. The federal government not denying this, doubling down, essentially saying it was necessary to save lives, particularly in Sydney. What we're talking about here is an arrangement which seen New South Wales in the month of August get above its per capita share of Pfizer going through primary care. Now, this is just one of the ways that the vaccine's distributed via GPs. Let's look at the numbers and see how the states have compared. When you look at the population of New South Wales, it's 32%, and their vaccine share for August was 45%. Compare that to what we saw in Victoria, 26% of the population, and they received just over 21% of Pfizer. Queensland, a different story again, 20% population, only around 15% of the share, and over in the West, 10% population share, and their share of the vaccine slightly lower than that, sitting at around 7%. The federal government is promising these other states are going to get catch-up doses. So New South Wales will see its share of Pfizer drop below its population rate as we see other states get given more Pfizer doses. But certainly Daniel Andrews in Victoria leading the charge on this yesterday, incredibly frustrated.
What I didn't know was that Premier Berejiklian's in a sprint while the rest of us are supposed to do some sort of egg and spoon thing.
Well, as we've had outbreaks, we've prioritised those areas to save lives.
Now, when you break down the data, there's been a lot of changes month by month in terms of these allocation. Greg Hunt pointing to the fact that Victoria's share of Pfizer was actually higher than 30% back in June, and that has now gone down as we've seen it reallocated to New South Wales. So, Laura, there's been a lot of chopping and changing in terms of these supplies, but the federal government doubling down on this, saying it was crucial to save lives to give these Pfizer doses to Sydney.